They said she was finished. James Thorne, the man she had loved since college, didn't just divorce her, he incinerated her reputation, stole her life's work, and left her penniless on the rainy streets of Chicago. He told the press, "Emily is unstable. She'll never recover." He truly believed that she was destined to be nothing more than a cautionary tale. But fate has a wicked sense of humor. 3 years later, as the heavy gold doors of the obsidian Gala swung open, the entire room went silent. James, standing there with his stolen empire, didn't just drop his champagne glass. He froze in absolute terror. Because the woman walking down the grand staircase wasn't just a guest. She was the billionaire heiress's new partner, and she held the one thing that could destroy him, the truth. The sound of a heavy oak door slamming shut has a finality to it that echoes in your bones. For Emily Vance, that sound was the punctuation mark at the end of her life as she knew it. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of Chicago evening where the wind cuts through your coat like a serrated knife. Emily stood on the sidewalk outside the brownstone she had paid for, staring at the closed door. Beside her feet were 3 cardboard boxes. They were wet at the bottom, soaking up the slush from the gutter. "James, please," she screamed, her voice cracking. She hated herself for begging, but desperation makes you do ugly things. "My portfolio is in there. The Helios blueprints. You can't keep them." The door opened just a crack. James Thorne, wearing a cashmere sweater that cost more than Emily's first car, looked out. His face wasn't angry. That would have been easier to handle. His face was bored. "There are no blueprints, Emily," James said smoothly. "You're hysterical. You've been under a lot of stress. I told the board you were taking a sabbatical for your mental health. They agreed it was best if I took lead on the project." "You stole them," she whispered, the cold reality settling in her chest. "You changed the digital signatures. You erased my backups." "I optimized them," James corrected, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "You always had the vision, Emily, but you lacked the killer instinct. I'm doing us both a favor. You go. Get help. I'll build the empire." He tossed a check onto the wet pavement. It fluttered down, landing in a puddle of oil and dirty water. "Severance. Don't come back." The door slammed again. The lock clicked. And just like that, Emily Vance, the true genius behind Thorne architecture, was erased. Flash forward 2 years. The clinking of silverware against fine china was a sound Emily had learned to tune out. She adjusted the heavy tray on her shoulder, navigating the crowded floor of the Gilded Cage, an upscale jazz lounge in downtown Manhattan. She wasn't Emily the architect anymore. She was just Ellie, the waitress who was quick with a refill and didn't make eye contact with the clientele. Her hands, once used for drafting complex geometric structures, were now rough from detergent and sanitizer. "Table 4 needs a bottle of Dom Chop Chop," the manager, a sweaty man named Rick, barked at her as she passed the bar. Emily nodded, keeping her head down. She moved toward table 4, the VIP booth in the corner. As she approached, a laugh rang out, a laugh that made her blood turn to ice. She froze. The tray trembled in her hand. Sitting there, surrounded by sycophants and hangers-on, was James. He looked better than ever. Success suited him. He was wearing a bespoke suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. One arm draped casually around a woman who looked like a supermodel. This was Vanessa Caldwell, the daughter of a steel magnate. James's ticket to the big leagues. Emily wanted to run. She wanted to drop the tray and flee out the back door. But she needed this job. Her rent was late and her mother's medical bills were piling up. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and stepped into the lion's den. "Champagne," she said, her voice low and unrecognizable. She kept her face angled away, focusing on popping the cork. "About time," James said, not even looking at her. He was too busy boasting. "The Sterling merger is practically a done deal, Vanessa. Once I get the old hag to sign off on the waterfront project, Thorne Enterprises will own the skyline." "You're so brilliant, James," Vanessa cooed, tracing a finger down his lapel. "It's not just brilliance," James said, swirling his glass. "It's about knowing when to trim the fat. You know my ex-wife. She tried to claim she designed the Helios Tower." The table erupted in laughter. The crazy one of his associates asked, completely delusional. James sighed, playing the victim perfectly. Sad, really. I heard she's working at a gas station in Ohio or something. Emily's hand shook. A splash of champagne spilled onto the pristine white tablecloth. The table went silent. You clumsy idiot! Vanessa shrieked, jumping back. That's vintage Chanel. James looked up, annoyance flashing in his eyes. He looked at the waitress's hands, first red chapped shaking. Then he looked at her face. For a second there was no recognition. Then his eyes widened. The arrogance faltered, replaced by a shock that quickly morphed into vicious amusement. Emily! The name hung in the air like a curse. Oh my God! James laughed, a sound of pure incredulity. Ohio was too generous. You're waiting tables here. I'm working, James, Emily said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the pounding in her ears. Something you wouldn't know how to do without stealing someone else's work. The table gasped. James's face darkened. He stood up, looming over her. Manager, he shouted. Rick came running over, sweating profusely. Mr. Thorne, is there a problem? This woman, James pointed a manicured finger at Emily, was rude, spilled a drink on my fiancé, and is harassing us. Get her out of my sight, now. Ellie, you're fired, Rick said, instantly grabbing her arm. Get your stuff. But, go! Emily looked at James one last time. He was smirking, raising his glass in a mock toast. Recovery doesn't look good on you, darling. She didn't cry. Not there. She ripped her apron off, threw it on the floor, and walked out the back exit into the alleyway. It was raining again. It always seemed to be raining when James destroyed her life. The alley behind the gilded cage was a narrow cobblestone throat of the city, choked with dumpsters and the smell of old fryer grease. Emily leaned against the wet brick wall, letting the freezing rain wash over her face. She was 32 years old, brilliant, and she had just lost her minimum wage lifeline. Stupid, she whispered to herself, hitting the back of her head against the brick. Stupid pride. She was about to head toward the subway when she heard a noise. It wasn't the scuttling of a rat. It was a human sound. A whimper. Emily paused. The city had hardened her, but it hadn't killed her heart. She squinted into the gloom further down the alley. Near the overflowing recycling bin, a figure was slumped over. It looked like a pile of rags at first. As Emily stepped closer, she saw it was an elderly woman. She was dressed in a heavy, tattered wool coat that had seen better decades, wearing a scarf wrapped tightly around her head. She was frantically digging through a pile of wet cardboard boxes, her hands trembling violently. Ma'am? Emily called out softly. The woman jumped, clutching her chest. She turned around. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold. She looked frail, like a gust of wind could shatter her. My pin, the woman rasped. She had a strange accent, clipped and refined, though her voice was weak. I dropped it. It rolled under here, please. It's all I have left of him. Most people would have walked away. A crazy old lady digging in the trash in a dark alley, that was a recipe for getting mugged or stabbed. But Emily saw the terror in the woman's eyes. It was the same look Emily had felt on her own face 2 years ago when the door slammed shut. Okay, Emily said, dropping her bag. Let me help. It's too cold for you to be down there. Emily got down on her hands and knees on the filthy, wet pavement. The water soaked through her jeans instantly. She didn't care. She began shifting the heavy, sodden boxes of liquor bottles. What does it look like? Emily asked. A bird, the woman whispered, shivering violently. A phoenix, gold, with a ruby eye. Emily dug deeper. Broken glass sliced her palm, but she ignored the sting. She felt around in the muck, her fingers numb. Is this it? She pulled out a small, mud-caked object. She wiped it on her sleeve. Even in the dim light of the street lamp, it glittered. It was a phoenix, intricately detailed with a ruby that looked disturbingly real for a piece of costume jewelry. The old woman let out a sob, snatching it with shaking hands. You found it! You found it! She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She slumped against the dumpster, gasping for air. Her skin was gray. "You're freezing," Emily realized. The woman was going into hypothermia. Emily didn't think twice. She took off her own coat, a cheap but warm puffer jacket, and wrapped it around the old woman's shoulders. Then she pulled out her thermos from her bag. It still had lukewarm tea in it. "Drink this," Emily commanded gently. The woman drank, her eyes fixed on Emily. They were sharp eyes, strikingly blue against her wrinkled face. You gave me your coat. You're shivering." "I'm young," Emily said, rubbing her arms. "I can run to the train. You need this more." "You were crying earlier," the woman observed. She wasn't missing anything. "Why," Emily let out a bitter laugh. "Just a bad night. Ran into an ex-husband who likes to remind me that I'm nothing." "And are you nothing?" Emily looked up at the sliver of sky between the buildings. "I used to design skyscrapers. I used to dream in steel and glass. Now I just got fired for spilling champagne on a suit I couldn't afford in 10 lifetimes. So yeah, maybe he's right." The old woman fingered the phoenix pin. She looked at Emily, really looked at her as if she was measuring the structural integrity of a building. "He sounds like a fool," the woman said. Her voice was suddenly stronger. "And fools build on sand." "I should get you a cab," Emily said, checking her phone. "Where do you live? Is there a shelter?" The woman smiled a cryptic, thin smile. "No shelter. I have a ride coming. But I need you to do something for me." "What?" The woman reached into the pocket of her tattered dress underneath Emily's coat and pulled out a business card. It was thick black cardstock with gold embossing. But it wasn't a business name. It was just an address on 5th Avenue and a time. Tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. "My name is Sarah Fiel," the woman said. "Bring me my coat tomorrow, and bring your portfolio." "My portfolio?" Emily blinked. "I told you I don't." "A woman who digs in the mud for a stranger's memory has an eye for detail," Sarah Fiel said. "And a woman who gives her coat to a beggar has a spine of steel. I want to see what you can build." Before Emily could ask another question, a car turned into the alley. It wasn't a police car or a taxi. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, sleek and black as midnight. The driver, a mountain of a man with a scarred jaw, jumped out and opened the rear door. He didn't look at Sarah Fiel with disgust for her rags. He bowed his head with immense respect. "Madam Sterling," the driver said, "we were worried when you slipped away from security." Sterling, Emily's breath hitched. Sarah Fiel Sterling. The matriarch of the Sterling shipping dynasty. The woman known as the Iron Ghost, because she hadn't been seen in public for a decade. The old woman climbed into the car, but before the door closed, she looked back at Emily, who was standing frozen in the rain. 9:00 a.m. "Emily," Sarah Fiel said, "don't be late. We have an empire to topple." Emily didn't sleep that night. She spent the entire night in her tiny, drafty studio apartment digging through her digital archives. James had wiped the main servers, but he had been arrogant. He didn't know about the physical sketchbooks. She kept the raw, hand-drawn concepts that predated the CAD files. She pulled them out from under her bed. The Helios project. The graceful curves, the wind turbine integration, the eco-glass structure. It was all there. Her soul on paper. At 8:45 a.m. she stood in front of the address on the card. It wasn't an office building. It was a pre-war mansion on 5th Avenue that looked like a fortress. The windows were dark. There was no doorman, just a camera with a red blinking eye. Emily buzzed. "Name," a voice crackled. "Emily Vance. I'm here to see Sarah Fiel." The heavy iron gate clicked and swung open automatically. She walked through a courtyard filled with statues that looked vaguely threatening and entered the main hall. It was cavernous, filled with covered furniture. It smelled of lavender and old money. "In the conservatory," a voice echoed. Emily followed the sound to the back of the house. She entered a massive glass room filled with exotic orchids. Sitting at a small wrought iron table was Seraphiel. Gone were the rags. She was wearing a sharp navy blue power suit that looked like armor. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun. "You're 3 minutes early," Seraphiel said without looking up from her tea. "Good. Punctuality is the courtesy of kings." "Mrs. Sterling," Emily said, clutching her portfolio against her chest. I didn't realize who you were last night." "That was the point." Seraphiel gestured to a chair. "Sit. Do you know why I was in that alley, Emily?" "No, ma'am." "Because I am dying." Seraphiel said it as casually as discussing the weather. Emily froze. "Not today and not tomorrow." Seraphiel continued, taking a sip of tea. "But soon enough. I have no children. My board of directors is a pack of hyenas waiting for me to fall so they can strip my company for parts. They want to merge with a trendy modern firm to revitalize the brand." Seraphiel looked up, her blue eyes piercing. "They are pushing for a merger with Thorne Enterprises." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "James?" "He has charmed them," Seraphiel said with a scowl. "He showed them plans for a building called the Helios. He claims it will revolutionize green energy in urban centers. My board is eating it up. They want to announce the partnership at the Obsidian Gala in 3 months. Seraphiel reached out a bony hand. "Show me." Emily opened her portfolio. She laid out the sketches. The original dates were stamped on the bottom of the pages, dates that were 3 years old. Seraphiel studied them in silence. She traced the lines of the drawing with her finger. She looked at the calculations Emily had scribbled in the margins, calculations about wind load and thermal dynamics that James's shiny renders would never show. "He didn't just steal the look," Seraphiel murmured. "He stole the soul of the building. But he doesn't understand the engineering, does he?" "No," Emily said, finding her voice. "The spinal truss system is complex. If he tries to build it based on the renders alone without the core load-bearing math I developed, it won't be stable. He's selling a facade." Seraphiel closed the book. She looked at Emily. "I made my fortune in shipping Miss Vance. I know how to spot a vessel that will sink." Seraphiel stood up and walked to the glass wall, looking out at the garden. "I need a successor. Not a corporate shark, but a builder. Someone who understands that a legacy is built on stone, not sand. And I need someone to save my company from that charlatan." She turned back to Emily. "I am offering you a job, but not as an architect, not yet." "Then what?" Emily asked. "As my consultant." Seraphiel smiled, and it was a dangerous, predatory smile. "James Thorne thinks he is negotiating with a senile old woman. He doesn't know I have a secret weapon. You are going to guide me through these negotiations. You will tell me exactly what questions to ask to expose his incompetence. You will design the hurdles he has to jump over. We are going to let him think he has won right until the moment he steps off the ledge." "And then?" Emily asked, her heart pounding against her ribs. "And then," Seraphiel's eyes gleamed, "we take everything." The next 3 months were not a makeover. They were a resurrection. Emily moved into the guest wing of the Sterling mansion. It was a world of hushed corridors, polished marble, and an intensity that rivaled any graduate school architecture program. Seraphiel didn't just want Emily to look the part of a high society power player. She wanted Emily to internalize it. "Shoulders back," Seraphiel commanded one morning in the library. She was sitting in her wheelchair now. Her good days were becoming fewer, but her voice cracked like a whip. "You walk like you are apologizing for taking up space. Stop it. You are the smartest person in the room. Walk like you own the floorboards." Emily adjusted her posture, looking at her reflection in the gilded mirror. The exhausted waitress with the messy bun was fading. In her place was a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper jawline, dressed in tailored silk. But the real work happened in the war room, a converted study where Emily had set up her command center. Seraphil had given Emily access to the confidential correspondence between Thorne Enterprises and the Sterling board. It was worse than Emily had imagined. "Look at this," Emily said one evening, pacing around a large table covered in blueprints. "James sent over the revised structural specs for the Helios Tower yesterday. He's changed the material for the support beams." Seraphil wheeled herself over. "To what?" He switched from a titanium alloy composite to standard reinforced steel. Emily said, her voice trembling with professional rage. "He's cutting costs. He has to be. Titanium is expensive and the price has spiked. But the Helios design relies on the tensile flexibility of the alloy. If he uses steel, the building will be too rigid. The first time a high-velocity wind shear hits Chicago off the lake, the upper floors won't sway. They'll snap." "He's building a coffin," Seraphil murmured. "Does the board know?" "No. He hid the change in the appendices of a 400-page budget report. He labeled it Material Optimization. It looks like a savings of $20 million, which the board loves. But in reality, it's a death sentence for anyone inside that building during a storm." "He is reckless," Seraphil said, her eyes narrowing. "He's desperate," Emily corrected. She pulled up a financial dossier she had compiled. "I did some digging into Thorne Enterprises' public filings. James is leveraging everything he has on this merger. He bought a private island, a fleet of cars, and that ring for Vanessa. He's cash poor. If the Sterling deal falls through, he defaults on 3 massive loans. He needs your money to actually build the tower." Then Seraphil smiled a cold, terrifying expression. "Then let's turn up the heat. I want you to draft a response to his proposal. Ask him about the material optimization. Use technical jargon he won't understand. Force him to consult his engineers. Let's see him squirm." For the next few weeks, Emily became a ghost haunting James Thorne. She dictated emails that Seraphil signed. She tore apart his designs, questioned his timelines, and demanded safety audits. Every time James replied, his tone became more frantic. He couldn't understand why the senile old woman he thought he was manipulating suddenly knew about load-bearing vectors and wind tunnel harmonics. "He's cracking," Emily said one afternoon, reading an email where James angrily insisted that his vision shouldn't be questioned by mere accountants. "Good," Seraphil said, coughing slightly into a handkerchief. "But email is too safe. It's time he faced the fire. I've scheduled a final review meeting here at the estate, next Tuesday." Emily froze. "He's coming here. I can't be seen. If he sees me, he'll know." "He won't see you," Seraphil assured her, patting Emily's hand. "But you will see him, and you will tell me exactly how to destroy him." Tuesday arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. The Sterling estate was silent, waiting. Emily was positioned in the library, but not in the open. The room had a hidden feature, a priest hole concealed behind a false bookcase, a remnant of the 1920s Prohibition era. It was small, dark, and allowed her to see into the room through a slat in the woodwork while listening via a high-fidelity speaker system. She wore a headset that connected directly to a tiny invisible earpiece in Seraphil's ear. "They're here," Max, the driver and head of security, announced over the comms. The heavy doors opened. James walked in, and the sight of him made Emily's stomach turn. But this time it wasn't fear. It was disgust. He looked tired. The confident tan was fading, and there were bags under his eyes that concealer couldn't hide. Vanessa was with him, scrolling on her phone, looking bored and out of place in the majestic, dusty library. Seraphil sat at the head of the long mahogany table, looking frail but regal. "Mr. Thorne," Seraphil said, her voice quavering slightly, an act she had perfected. "And Miss Caldwell, thank you for coming." "The pleasure is ours, Seraphil," James said, turning on the charm. He placed a leather briefcase on the table. "I trust you've had time to review the final contracts. The board is very eager to announce our partnership at the Obsidian Gala next week." "I have concerns," Seraphil said slowly. "Concerns." James's smile tightened. We've addressed every email. My team has been working around the clock. Ask him about the wind shears, Emily whispered into her headset. Her voice was calm, controlled. Seraphil tapped her finger on the table. My consultants are worried about the wind shear on the 45th floor, James. With the switch to steel, the oscillation dampening seems insufficient. James blinked. He glanced at Vanessa, then back at Seraphil. The steel is top of the line. It's actually stronger. Tell him strength isn't flexibility, Emily coached. Tell him the Tacoma Narrows Bridge was strong too. Strength is not flexibility, young man, Seraphil repeated verbatim. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge was strong. It also collapsed. James laughed nervously. That's hardly a fair comparison. Look, Seraphil, you have to trust the artist. The Helios is a masterpiece. It's my design, Emily whispered, tears pricking her eyes in the darkness of her hiding spot. He doesn't know why the curves are there. Ask him about the atrium vents. The atrium vents? Seraphil interrupted him. Why are they positioned on the north face? It seems counterintuitive for thermal regulation. James faltered. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then improvised. Aesthetics. It captures the morning light better. Liar? Emily hissed. It's for the passive cooling system. He cut the HVAC budget so the vents are critical. If he moves them for aesthetics, the building becomes a greenhouse. It will be uninhabitable in the summer. If you prioritize light over the passive cooling intake, Seraphil said, her voice hardening, dropping the frail act for a second. The tenants will roast alive in July. Did you cut the HVAC budget, James? James slammed his hand on the table. Vanessa jumped. Who are you talking to? James snapped, looking around the room paranoidly. These questions. This isn't you. You're a shipping magnate, not a structural engineer. Who is feeding you this? I do my homework, Seraphil said calmly. And your anger suggests I am right. You are cutting corners. I am managing a budget, James shouted, his face turning red. Do you want this built or not? Because without my firm, without my name, you have nothing but a dying brand and a pile of money you can't take to the grave. Vanessa put a hand on his arm. Babe, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. James shook her off. He turned back to Seraphil. The gala is in 5 days. The press releases are drafted. If you back out now, Sterling shipping stock drops 20% overnight. You need me. Seraphil looked at him for a long, silent minute. Emily held her breath. Very well, Seraphil said softly. Emily's heart stopped. What? I will sign the preliminary agreement, Seraphil said. We will announce the merger at the gala. James let out a breath, his shoulders sagging. A victorious smirk returned to his lips. You made the right choice, Seraphil. Truly. But, Seraphil added, raising a finger, I want to meet the lead architect. The one who actually drew the plans. I want to shake the hand of the genius behind the Helios. That would be me, James said, tapping his chest. I am the lead architect. Then I will see you at the gala, Seraphil said dismissively. Now get out of my house. As James and Vanessa left, James looked like a man who had survived a firing squad. He grabbed his briefcase and practically ran out the door. Emily burst out of the hidden room as soon as the main doors closed. Why did you agree? Emily cried. He's lying. He's going to ruin everything. Seraphil turned her wheelchair around. Her eyes were sparkling with mischief. I agreed to the announcement, Emily, not the contract. The contract doesn't become binding until both parties sign the digital ledger in front of the board at the gala. So. Seraphil reached out and cupped Emily's cheek. He thinks he has won. He will walk into that gala feeling invincible. He will stand on that stage and claim credit for your work in front of the entire world. And then, Seraphil whispered, you are going to walk in and take it back. We aren't just going to stop the deal, Emily. We are going to expose him, publicly, irreversibly. She handed Emily a black velvet box. Open it. Emily opened the box. Inside lay the phoenix brooch, the one she had dug out of the trash 3 months ago. It had been cleaned and polished. The gold shone like fire. The ruby eye seemed to glow. "Wear this," Seraphil said. "It is the crest of the sterling successor. When you walk into that ballroom wearing this, the board will know exactly who you are, and James will know exactly what he has lost." The night of the Obsidian Gala Chicago was blanketed in snow. The event was being held at the Grand Hall of the Art Institute, the most prestigious venue in the city. Every major news outlet was there. The paparazzi line was 3 deep. In the limousine, Emily stared at her hands. They weren't shaking. She looked different. Seraphil's team had descended upon her for 6 hours. Her hair, usually messy, was styled in sleek vintage Hollywood waves. Her makeup was sharp, accentuating her eyes. But the dress was a weapon. It was a custom-made gown of midnight blue velvet, structured and architectural, with a neckline that plunged daringly. It looked like something a queen would wear to an execution. Pinned to the left shoulder was the phoenix. "I can't believe you're not coming in with me," Emily said, looking at the empty seat across from her. Seraphil had taken a separate car. She was entering via the back entrance to prepare the board. Emily had to walk the red carpet alone. "You need to be seen," Seraphil had told her. "Not as my assistant, but as a force of nature." The car stopped. The door opened. The flashbulbs exploded like lightning. Emily stepped out. For a moment, the photographers were confused. They didn't recognize her. Who was this stunning woman stepping out of the Sterling lead car? Was she a foreign dignitary? A movie star? "Who are you wearing?" a reporter screamed. Emily ignored them. She walked the carpet with the stride Seraphil had taught her, shoulders back, chin up, owning the ground. She didn't smile. She looked dangerous. Inside the grand hall, the air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi. The room was packed with the city's elite billionaires, politicians, tech moguls. And in the center of it all, holding court near the ice sculpture, was James Thorne. He was in his element. He was laughing, clinking glasses, accepting preemptive congratulations. Vanessa was clinging to his arm, wearing a dress that glittered a little too much. "To the future," James toasted loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. "To Thorne Sterling Enterprises. To James." His sycophants echoed. Emily stood at the top of the grand staircase that led down into the ballroom. She waited. She waited for the music to lull between songs. Then she began to descend. The rhythmic click-clack of her heels on the marble steps cut through the ambient noise. People turned to look. First a few heads turned, then more. The sheer presence she radiated demanded attention. The midnight blue dress flowed around her like water. The phoenix brooch caught the light of the chandeliers, blazing like a red eye. The hush spread across the room like a wave. James, noticing the silence, turned around. He looked up at the staircase. His smile froze. His glass of champagne slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a shatter that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Emily." He mouthed the word soundless. Vanessa looked up, squinting. "Who is that? Is that the waitress?" Emily reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for her, sensing the tension. She didn't stop. She walked straight toward James. He looked as if he was seeing a ghost. His brain couldn't compute the image. This wasn't the crying woman in the rain. This wasn't the waitress in the stained apron. This was a predator. "You..." James stammered, his voice loud in the silence. "What are you doing here? Security? Someone get security?" No one moved. The crowd was too captivated. "Hello, James," Emily said. Her voice was smooth, amplified by the acoustics of the hall. "I hear you're announcing a merger tonight, based on a design called the Helios." You..." James turned red, panic setting in. "Get her out of here. She's a stalker. She's my unstable ex-wife." "Unstable." Emily tilted her head. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small folded piece of blue paper. It was an original blueprint. Is that why you kept the original drafts of the Helios in your safe? The ones with my handwriting on them? A gasp went through the room. She's lying, James screamed, stepping forward aggressively. She's a nobody. I built this company. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice boomed from the stage. Everyone turned. The spotlight hit the podium. Seraphile Sterling was there, sitting in her wheelchair, looking like an empress on a throne. She leaned into the microphone. I believe, Seraphile said, her voice echoing through the hall, that there has been a misunderstanding regarding tonight's announcement. James looked from Emily to Seraphile, his eyes wide with terror. He realized too late that the trap hadn't just sprung. He was already dead. I am not merging with Thorn Enterprises, Seraphile announced. I am acquiring it, or rather my new partner is. Seraphile extended a hand toward Emily. Everyone please meet the new CEO of Sterling Vance Architecture, the true genius behind the Helios project, Ms. Emily Vance. The room erupted. The sound of James's champagne glass shattering against the marble floor didn't just break the silence. It seemed to fracture the very reality James Thorne had constructed around himself. For 3 years he had lived in a world where he was the king, where his word was law, and where Emily Vance was nothing more than a bad memory, a stain he had scrubbed from his history. But now the stain was standing at the foot of the stairs, wearing a dress that cost more than his car, looking not like a victim, but like a judge. The 300 guests in the grand hall of the Art Institute, billionaires, senators, and tech moguls, held their breath. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the sudden sharp odor of panic. This is... James's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. This is clearly a prank, a very poor taste prank. Seraphile really bringing my unstable ex-wife here to a business gala. He laughed, but it was a lonely, hollow sound. No one joined him. The crowd's eyes darted between the sweating man in the tuxedo and the cool, composed woman ascending the stairs. Security! James barked, his facade slipping. Get her out! She's trespassing. She's mentally unwell. 2 large shadows detached themselves from the wall, but they didn't move toward Emily. They moved toward the stage, crossing their arms and blocking James's path to the podium. It was Max Seraphile's head of security and his second in command. Mr. Thorne, Max rumbled, his voice low but carrying across the silent room. Please remain where you are. The presentation is just beginning. Seraphile Sterling sat on the stage in her wheelchair, her back straight, her expression unreadable. She motioned to the microphone. Emily, if you would. Emily stepped onto the platform. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked directly at James. Up close, she could see the beads of sweat gathering at his hairline. She could see the tremor in his hands. I'm not here to cause a scene, James, Emily said into the microphone. Her voice was smooth, calm, and terrifyingly reasonable. I'm here to save a building, and the people who might one day walk inside it. She clicked a small remote in her hand. The massive LED screen behind her, which had been displaying the logo of the merger, flickered and changed. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It was a blueprint. But not the glossy, sanitized 3D render James had been showing investors for months. This was a raw, technical schematic filled with complex calculus equations, stress load annotations, and handwritten notes in the margins. This, Emily said, pointing to the screen, is the original structural schematic for the Helios Tower. I drew this 3 years ago on a drafting table in our old brownstone. Lies, James screamed, stepping forward until Max held up a hand to stop him. She forged them. That's my design. Is it? Emily asked. She clicked the remote again. The image zoomed in on a specific section of the tower's spine, the 45th floor. Then perhaps, Mr. Architect, you can explain to the board of directors why you decided to alter the material specifications for the primary load-bearing trusses. The room went deadly quiet. Even the waiters stopped moving. James blinked, his eyes darting around. We optimized the materials. It's standard industry practice. You switched from a titanium alloy composite to grade B reinforced steel, Emily stated, her voice hardening. Do you know the difference, James? He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He was a salesman, not an engineer. Titanium alloy has a flexibility modulus of 110 gigapascals, Emily explained, turning to the horrified board members sitting in the front row. It is designed to bend. Chicago is the windy city. When a high-velocity wind shear hits a building of this height off Lake Michigan, the structure must sway. If it doesn't, the kinetic energy has nowhere to go. She turned back to James. Grade B steel is rigid. It has a modulus of nearly 200. It doesn't sway, James. It snaps. She clicked the remote one more time. A simulation played on the screen. It showed the Helios Tower in a winter storm. As the wind hit the steel-reinforced section, the building didn't bend. Instead, a red fracture line appeared. The top 20 floors sheared off, collapsing into the street below. If you build this tower the way James Thorne intends, Emily said, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like thunder, you are not building a legacy. You are building a tomb. Mr. Henderson, the chairman of the Sterling board, stood up slowly. His face was pale. Mr. Thorne, he demanded, his voice shaking with rage. Is this true? Did you change the specs to steel? It saved $20 million? James shouted, throwing his hands up. You wanted better margins. You wanted the budget cut. I gave you what you wanted. We wanted a profit, you fool, not a mass casualty event, Henderson roared. It's not my fault. James was unraveling now, pacing frantically at the bottom of the stairs. She's sabotaging me. It doesn't matter what she says. She has no proof of ownership. I have the copyright. Actually, Sarah Field's voice cut in. She leaned forward, her frailty vanishing, replaced by the iron will of a titan of industry. That is where you are mistaken. Sarah Field nodded to Emily. We ran a forensic data recovery on the servers you wiped, James, Emily said. You thought deleting the files was enough, but you forgot about the metadata. Every line of code, every digital brushstroke on those blueprints is stamped with my user ID and dated 3 years ago. The Copyright Office received the evidence this morning. They have already revoked your filing. James looked like he had been punched in the gut. He staggered back, bumping into a waiter. But that's a civil matter, James stammered, grasping at straws. You can sue me. Fine. But the merger is set. The contracts are ready. He turned to Vanessa Caldwell, who was standing frozen nearby, clutching her clutch bag like a shield. Vanessa, tell them. We're partners. The Thorne-Sterling merger is unbreakable. Sarah Field laughed. It was a dry, dark sound. Oh, James, you really didn't read the fine print of our correspondence, did you? There is no merger. James froze. What? I am not merging with Thorne Enterprises, Sarah Field announced, her voice projecting to the back of the hall. I am acquiring its debt. The screen changed again. This time it displayed a series of financial documents. They were foreclosure notices. You leveraged everything to keep up appearances. Sarah Field narrated, reading the screen like a grocery list. To buy the land for the tower, you took out a massive high-interest loan. To buy your private island, another loan. To buy that ridiculous Rolls-Royce outside, yet another loan. She paused for effect. All of those loans were held by the Sovereign Trust Bank, which as of last week is a subsidiary of Sterling Shipping. You missed your interest payment on Tuesday, James. You defaulted. Emily stepped to the edge of the stage, looking down at the man who had left her penniless in the rain. We've called in the debt, James, Emily said softly. The bank has exercised its right to immediate seizure of assets. What? What does that mean? James whispered. It means... Emily said that Thorne Enterprises is insolvent. It means your brownstone is now property of the bank. Your island is property of the bank. Your car, your accounts, even the tuxedo on your back. It's all gone. It's over. The silence that followed was absolute. James stood in the center of the ballroom, stripped bare in front of the very people he had tried so hard to impress. He turned desperately to Vanessa. She was his last lifeline, the daughter of the steel magnate, his ticket to safety. "Nessa," he pleaded, reaching for her hand. "Baby, please. It's a trick. My lawyers will fix this. We just need to go. We can take your jet." Vanessa Caldwell looked at him. She looked at the foreclosure notice on the screen. She looked at the furious board members. And then she looked at the man she had thought was a king, now revealed to be a pauper in a stolen suit. "You spent it all," Vanessa asked, her voice shrill and piercing. "You told me you had liquid capital. You told me you were a billionaire." "I am. I will be," James begged, "just as soon as the tower is built." "The tower you stole," Vanessa scoffed. She looked down at her hand, at the massive, glittering diamond ring he had proposed with. "Is this fake too? Did you steal this?" No, that's real," James cried. "I spent the last of the company's operating fund on it. It's worth $500,000. "You embezzled corporate funds to buy jewelry," Vanessa shrieked. The realization hit her like a slap. She wasn't just dating a failure. She was an accessory to fraud. "I'm not going down with you," she hissed. She ripped the ring off her finger. With a violent motion, she threw it at him. The heavy diamond struck James in the chest and bounced away, rolling across the marble floor until it stopped at Emily's feet. "Vanessa, wait. Don't touch me." She recoiled as if he were contagious. "You loser!" She turned on her heel and stormed out of the hall, the rhythmic click of her heels echoing the departure of the last shred of James's dignity. James stood alone. The circle of guests had widened, isolating him like a diseased animal. He looked up at Emily, his eyes wet with tears of rage and humiliation. "You can't do this," he hissed, his voice trembling. "I am James Thorne. I made you. You were nothing before me, and you'll be nothing after this." "I was never nothing, James," Emily replied, her voice steady. "I was the foundation you built your life on, and you made the mistake of trying to crush the foundation." "Mr. Thorne," a deep, authoritative voice cut through the tension. James spun around. 2 uniformed police officers, accompanied by a detective in a cheap suit, had entered the hall. They walked straight through the parted crowd. "James Thorne?" the detective asked. I... James backed away, bumping into the ice sculpture. "You are under arrest," the detective stated, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Charges have been filed for corporate fraud, grand larceny, embezzlement, and reckless endangerment." "No," James whimpered as they grabbed his arms. "No, you don't understand. I'm an architect. I'm a visionary." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, snapping the metal cuffs onto James's wrists. The sound was final, sharp, and brutal. As they dragged him toward the exit, James fought. He twisted his head back, locking eyes with Emily one last time. He wanted to see triumph in her eyes. He wanted to see gloating. That would have made him feel like a martyr. But there was no triumph. Emily looked at him with a cold, distant pity. It was the look one gives to a building that has been condemned, a recognition that it is broken beyond repair and must be removed for the safety of the city. "Emily!" he screamed, his voice breaking as they hauled him through the doors. "Emily!" The heavy oak doors slammed shut, cutting off his scream. The room remained silent for a heartbeat longer. Then slowly Seraphiel Sterling began to clap. It was a slow, rhythmic applause. Mr. Henderson joined in. Then the board. Then the guests. Within seconds, the grand hall was erupting in a thunderous ovation. But they weren't clapping for the drama. They were clapping for the woman standing on the stage. The woman who had walked through the fire and come out holding the blueprints to the future. 6 months later. The Chicago skyline was piercingly blue. The wind whipped off Lake Michigan, cold and biting, but on the observation deck of the newly completed Helios Tower, everything was still. Emily Vance stood by the glass railing looking out over the city. The building was a masterpiece. The titanium alloy trusses installed under her personal supervision were doing exactly what she had designed them to do. They were breathing. The massive structure swayed imperceptibly against the wind, absorbing the force rather than fighting it. It was a dance of physics and art. "It's not just a building," a voice said behind her. "It's a statement." Emily turned. Sarah Fields Sterling was sitting in her wheelchair near the entrance of the deck. She looked older now, the battle with her illness taking its toll, but her eyes were still as bright as the sapphire in the phoenix brooch. "It's safe," Emily corrected, walking over to her. "That's all that matters." "It is both," Sarah Field insisted. "The architectural critics are calling it the Phoenix of Chicago. They say it rises from the skyline like a flame." She paused, a small smile playing on her lips. "Fitting, don't you think?" Emily smiled. She touched the lapel of her blazer. She was the CEO of Sterling Vance Architecture now. She had bought her old brownstone back from the bank auction, using her own money, and turned it into a shelter for women starting over. "Have you heard," Emily asked softly, "about Mr. Thorne?" Sarah Field nodded, adjusting the blanket on her lap. "The trial concluded yesterday. 5 years in federal prison. Restitution to all the investors he defrauded. He's bankrupt, Emily. When he gets out, he won't even be allowed to design a doghouse. He has been permanently disbarred from the American Institute of Architects." Emily looked back out at the city. Somewhere down there, amidst the grid of gray streets, she had once stood in the rain with 3 wet boxes and a broken heart. She had thought her life was over. She had believed him when he said she would never recover. But looking at the city from 80 stories up, the view was very different. "He tried to bury me," Emily whispered, the wind catching her words. "Yes," Sarah Field said, reaching out to take Emily's hand. "But he forgot that you were a seed." The elevator chimed. "The mayor is waiting downstairs," Sarah Field said. "It's time for the ribbon cutting. They want a photo of the woman who changed the skyline." Emily took a deep breath. She smoothed her jacket, squared her shoulders, and lifted her chin. "I'm ready," Emily said. She took the handle of Sarah Field's wheelchair, and together the architect and the matriarch moved toward the elevator, leaving the ghosts of the past to fade into the wind high above the world that had once tried to break them. And that is the story of how Emily Vance turned her deepest rock bottom into a sky-high empire. James thought he could bury her, but he forgot that you cannot bury a seed, it only grows back stronger. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how hard people try to steal your light, your talent and your truth are things that can never be faked. Karma might be slow, but as James found out, it never misses an address. What do you think? Did Sarah Field go too far? Or did James get exactly what he deserved? And have you ever had a moment where someone underestimated you only for you to come back and prove them wrong? Let me know your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal twists and ultimate redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.